911 had plausible deniability until the episode's last scene. In order to show how much Buck will miss Eddie, Ryan Guzman, when he's gone, the scene in which Buck, Oliver Stark, looks for him after a terrible breakup may have simply been an affirmation of their friendship. Some word choices, such as Buck's apology for outing Eddie in front of everyone, may actually be inadvertent. However, the scene in Voices, where Buddie says goodbye, is not accidental. The aftermath of Detective Braeburn's, Abigail Spencer, kidnapping of Maddie, Jennifer Love Hewitt, at the end of the previous episode must be dealt with before we arrive. As anticipated, in favor of a variation on a main character in danger that could have occurred in almost any network crime drama, almost all traces of nuance and interesting character notes have been removed. It certainly lacks the moral ambiguity and consideration that sob stories so deftly incorporated. Voices begins with Howard, Kenneth Choi, and Buck coming home from their night out with the 118, only to discover that Maddie has vanished. Then, as Howard starts to feel anxious, 911 discloses that Detective Braeburn has been holding Maddie in a dusty basement. When the dispatcher briefly awakens from her slumber brought on by chloroform, she discovers that Braeburn appears to have split personality disorder. One aspect of the detective's personality is submissive and more hesitant to hurt Maddie, as evidenced by her self-talk. Last week, Maddie heard that voice on the phone. An unstable version of Braeburn, the dominant personality, wants to end the situation. This straightforward setup is the most careful consideration given to the main antagonist in Voices to date. Due to Maddie's extensive investigation into the case, Braeburn fears that her sinister secret will eventually come to light. Braeburn's motivation for abducting young girls is never explained in detail. She was a child who survived terrible conditions, turned into a runaway herself, and is now acting out her own perverted sense of justice. Oddly, Maddie never questions Braeburn about her motivations for choosing this dark route or her goals. She makes an initial attempt, but it is soon forgotten. The fact that Braeburn killed Richard Bullock to hide her crimes is also forgotten in this episode. Voices might have been a real continuation of sob stories, with Maddie using her empathy and challenging past to gain Braeburn's confidence. The majority of the episode is divided between Maddie's attempts to flee when Braeburn isn't present and Braeburn's attempts to control the damage, with the exception of a brief scene in which Maddie tries this strategy. And that might have been interesting. Quite early on, Athena, Angela Bassett, is told that Maddie has gone missing, which gives Voices the chance to develop like a cat-and-mouse thriller. Athena might have become suspicious after Braeburn made a mistake, and the hour might have been spent with the two women lying in each other's faces while attempting to support their different strategies. Given that Athena initially appeared a little awed by Braeburn, it would have been a clever reversal of their dynamic. Rather, Athena only starts to suspect Braeburn after learning that Detective Rick Romero, returning guest star Danny Nucci, was a runaway. Since we're waiting for the story to catch up to where we are, it can be challenging to keep the tension high when we know more than the characters. Furthermore, it seems completely unrealistic that Braeburn, who appears on the verge of losing it when interacting with Maddie, would not lose it or make a mistake at any other point. I'm not expecting realism from a franchise that became well known due to supernatural crises. Maddie telling a 911 caller to kill themselves, with vigor and intensity, in a room filled with witnesses, seems like the sort of thing that should at least get her reprimanded. Still might. Either way, that didn't bother me too much last week because Hewitt absolutely sells it. It's harder to swallow the implausibility and the narrative choices when so much of what's unfolding on screen isn't compelling. There are a few grace notes in the otherwise disappointing resolution to Maddie's kidnapping. I love that even though he doesn't want to, and even as he wills himself to consider positive outcomes, Howard can't help thinking Maddie is struggling with prepartum depression and has kept hidden for fear of being judged. It feels very authentic that the fear would still exist in Howard, even allowing that they've moved on, and he continually reassures Maddie. I hope and suspect that 911 will revisit this thread and that the couple will be a little more open about the challenges they face with a second child. It's also pretty cool when Braeburn briefly lets her mask fall a bit when she first meets Howard. She closes the office door, walks up to him, and calmly asks about the time Maddie attempted to drown herself in Season 5. She's obviously thinking of how to get rid of her abductee by making it look like a suicide. Voices, in general, needed to amp up Braeburn's madness by about 1,000 or tell an emotionally complex story about a remorseful villain. The episode straddles a disappointing middle ground, rarely trying to surprise or subvert. I say rarely because there is one scene that genuinely rises to the level of shocking. Late in Voices, Braeburn finally begins to unravel. She's recaptured the kidnapped victim from the previous episode, but Athena and Romero are on their way to the detective's home to confront her. Howard is also at Braeburn's door, hoping to share new information, and not yet aware that he's about to walk into the home of the serial killer who has abducted his wife. Braeburn snaps, slashing Maddie's throat open after a short tussle. It's unsettling to see Maddie instantly try to stop the blood from pouring out, seconds before dropping to the ground. There's never any real doubt that Maddie is going to be okay physically at least, but the abrupt explosion of violence and the decision to keep Maddie off-screen while Braeburn goes to meet Howard does an effective job of introducing danger into a plot where there was none. Maddie survives, helped along by plot armor, just in time to stop Braeburn from shooting Howard. Athena then arrives at exactly the right moment to put a bullet in Braeburn and end it all. It's a relatively gory finish from director Jennifer Lynch, as the veteran TV Helmer includes a shot of the blood splatter on Braeburn's window pane. Given the lack of anything more noteworthy on the Maddie front, Voices could have benefited from more of that frantic and chaotic energy. For her last scene, Maddie is recuperating in a hospital bed. Howard enters to visit his wife after spending the majority of the night with Hen, Aisha Hines, and Karen, Tracy Toms. After the ordeal she's been through, Maddie should be resting her voice, but she's awake and focused. The baby, a boy, is fine, Howard assures her. When Maddie finds out Ji-eun is expecting a younger brother, she breaks down in tears. From countless near-death experiences to a plethora of emotions, e.g. Eddie returning to Texas, the characters on 911 are no strangers to tragedy. Maddie Han, previously Buckley, played by Jennifer Love Hewitt, has always been an exception. Maddie has actually had a difficult time since her debut in Season 2, when we first saw her shortly after she fled an abusive marriage to Los Angeles. Nevertheless, Maddie's experience in the first episode of the two-part return of 911 season May 8th have been her darkest plot point to date. It could be more traumatic than her previous kidnapping, postpartum depression and escape to Boston, and almost losing her soon-to-be husband last season. Let's review Maddie's specific ordeal, discuss how the incident might affect the season going forward, and hopefully agree that Maddie Han deserves a vacation. Setting the scene, Maddie is working as a 911 dispatcher when she receives her first call from a person using a voice changer who admits to Maddie that they are suicidal and that they wish to murder a young girl named Jaina in order to guarantee that she goes to heaven. Maddie tries to save Jaina by promising the would-be murderer that she will make sure the police don't find them if they release the child. Naturally, the murderer is aware that she is lying, and by the time the call ends, Athena, Angela Bassett, has already arrived on the scene. Athena and LAPD Detective Amber Braeburn soon tell Maddie that they believe the person she spoke to might be a serial killer. Maddie acknowledges that she looked into comparable calls. Athena chooses to do more research on Bullock, the suspect Amber has her eye on. Maddie receives another call shortly after. Maddie makes the startling choice to convince Bullock, the murderer, to commit suicide before he harms anyone else. For Maddie, who is accustomed to saving lives rather than convincing someone to take their own, this plotline is already extremely traumatic. Maddie feels terrible guilt about what she did, even though she knows she saved Jaina. Maddie's darkest moment hasn't ended even then. The killer, who turns out to be none other than Amber, shows up and kidnaps Maddie while she and her daughter Ji-eun are alone at home while her husband Howard Chimney Han, Kenneth Choi, is at Eddie's, Ryan Guzman, surprise farewell party. Maddie is knocked out at the end of the episode, putting her and Ji-eun in danger. Although this episode, appropriately titled Sob Stories, is already quite depressing, viewers will recall that Maddie finds this plotline to be even more relatable. As you can see, Maddie's experience of being abducted is not new. In Season 2, Maddie was forced to kill her violent ex-husband Doug, played by Jennifer Love Hewitt's real-life husband, Brian Hallisey, in order to get away from him. Maddie, her friends, and her family have been plagued by this trauma for the past 6 seasons. Her brother Buck, Oliver Stark, sees him in his alternate reality coma dream, and more recently on their wedding day, Chimney hallucinated him while afflicted with encephalitis. Naturally, this episode also puts little Ji-eun in danger. While Maddie was taken, or worse taken with her, her young daughter was at home. Furthermore, Maddie is concerned about more than just Ji-eun. Maddie and Chimney had lengthy conversations about whether they were ready for or even wanted a second child during the first half of Season 8. Maddie had an extremely difficult postpartum period after her first pregnancy, which led her to flee to Boston and even make a tragic attempt at suicide in order to prevent further harm to her daughter and partner. Chimney's presence has been a recurring theme in all of Maddie's recent tragedies. The pair is genuinely in love, and their relationship has withstood the most trying times because Chim has always gone above and beyond to support Maddie in her choices. Their relationship will undoubtedly be strained and under pressure as a result of all this stress. But in her interview with Collider, Jennifer Love Hewitt states that everything that Maddie fights for in episode 10 is G, and that baby and chimney. Maddie is a woman who was put on this planet to fight over and over and over and over again. Hewitt highlights that Maddie gained some knowledge from Doug's kidnapping, which she will apply in the upcoming episode. Maddie is fundamentally a fighter, and she has demonstrated that she will always stand up for her family by going back to Chimney and Ji-yoon during her most trying times. Naturally, the characters don't deserve to go through such hardships, but nobody is immune to the inherent peril of playing a character in a procedural. In addition to being a heartbreaking plot point, Maddie's kidnapping is likely to trigger many memories of past traumas. Maddie has obviously been through a lot, and this 2-episode arc may be her darkest plot yet because it touches so close to home. Can we all agree that Maddie deserves a break after the events of next week's episode? 911 puts all of its characters through a lot.